What's going on, guys? I hope you're having a good day so far, and today we're going to be talking about budgeting. I know I haven't uploaded in a couple weeks, but I've had a lot of stuff going on. 2 weeks ago from today, I graduated from my master's program, and then a couple days after that, I woke up sick and was sick pretty much until Christmas. And then this week, I've been just kind of getting over that and relaxing and stuff, and so now I am ready to get back on the grind. I'm making a goal to upload 100 YouTube videos in 2023, so I'm going to try to do one every 3 days, which I think is very doable. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about budgeting, which is essentially just keeping track of your monthly expenses compared to your income, and this is a really important topic and concept, so I figured I'd make a video about it. So the video is going to be split up into two sections. The first section is going to be reasons that you need to budget, and then the second section is going to be how to actually make a budget. So we'll start with reasons you need to budget. Number one, keep your eye on the prize. So what this means is that budgeting helps you figure out your long-term goals and work towards them. And when you map out these goals and have a plan to achieve them, it makes it a lot easier to say no to things you want to buy that don't actually fit within your budget. So it'll make you have better spending habits. Number two is a budget ensures that you do not spend money that you don't have. And this is a big problem, especially in our country, because the average credit card debt per household in 2021 was about $5,500. And credit cards can be useful tools, but they're also dangerous because they give people access to more money than they actually have. And I'm going to make another video in the near future about credit cards and how you can use them to be helpful and get an advantage from them. But most of the time, credit cards are a dangerous thing. Number three is it helps you save the right amount of money for retirement. And young people often neglect saving for retirement because it seems like it's so far away. But if you understand compounding, which if you don't, make sure you go check out my video that I made about compounding. But if you understand compounding, you know that the earlier you start saving is the more money you're going to end up when it actually comes time for you to retire. And so budgeting allows you to figure out how much money you have left over each month and have available to make consistent contributions toward that goal. Number four is budgeting helps you prepare for emergencies, which I'll probably make a video about this by itself in the future as well. But there will always be unexpected expenses that come up throughout life. And it's recommended for everyone to have 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenses in a savings account in the case of emergencies. And obviously it takes time to save up this amount. And so once you figure out the dollar amount that you need or want to have in your savings, budgeting will help you set aside a little bit of money each month to work toward that. Number five is budgeting reveals bad spending habits. And this one actually hits home for me because recently I downloaded a budgeting app just to try it out and see how it works. And the first thing I noticed was that a lot of little things that I'm just normally used to spending money on actually add up to more money each month than I would have thought. So if you have a budget and you keep track of all this stuff, then it will help you identify things that you're spending money on that you could potentially find a cheaper option for, or even just cut out altogether. And in the second section of this video, I'll talk about a few of the apps that I've looked at that are good for that. And then number six is a hugely important one, and that is budgeting reduces your stress in the long term. So sitting down and figuring out your budget, especially if it's with a spouse or significant other, can be really stressful. However, once you figure out what your goals are and you have a budget that will help you achieve them, there will be a lot less stress involved in the future. I promise you the stress of figuring out your budget will be nothing compared to the stress that you could feel when you end up in credit card debt or are worried about not being able to pay for your expenses next month. So an example I have of a situation like this is this summer I worked with a financial advisor and I helped him work with a client who was a single lady who lived by herself and she made over 6 figures. So she should have been doing completely fine, but tracking her spending and budgeting is something she said made her really anxious, which is totally understandable, but that resulted in her putting everything on a credit card, and then she ended up spending a lot more money than she had, and then she had credit card debt, and it was just kind of a downward spiral. So I promise it can happen. Okay, now we're going to move into the second section of the video, which is actually how to make a budget. So step number one of making a budget is to calculate your take-home pay. And so it's much better to figure out your budget based on your take-home pay than your salary, because your salary is almost always going to have things deducted from it, such as taxes, benefits, retirement contributions if you have that through your employer, insurance premiums. And another note that I'll make, if your income fluctuates, so if you have like a commission-based job or a job where your income is like highly dependent on your performance or something like that, what I would do is take a conservative average of several months, take maybe 3 to 6 months in the past and calculate the average take-home pay from that period. And then whatever the average is, I would go a little bit lower than that, just so if you have, a few down months or something, you're not going to be struggling to, make your budget work. Step number two is going to be to track how much you are spending. And there are great apps for this, like I mentioned earlier. One is Mint, another is Good Budget, and then Every Dollar. So start by focusing on your fixed monthly expenses that stay the same all the time, because fixed expenses can usually be changed in the long term but not the short term. An example of this is like with an apartment lease. So if you sign an apartment lease for a year, you're basically locked into paying that rent amount for the whole year until the lease is up. So in the short term, you can't really change that number, but in the long term, you can change the number because you could choose to move somewhere else. It's going to have a lot lower rent. So after you subtract all of your fixed expenses from your take-home pay, you'll be able to see how much is left over for variable expenses. And variable expenses are almost always the things that you can cut down on in the short term. Number 3 is the simplest one in terms of the concept, but actually doing it and making the decision can be really tough. And that is to figure out how much money you want to allocate to financial goals such as investing, saving, paying down debt, going on a vacation, or anything else. So after you figure out what your goals are, number 4 is going to be to actually make a plan that will balance out your variable expenses and your contributions toward those goals. So this plan can be personal to you. You can do whatever you want, but I'm just going to give you an example of something that some people like to do, and that is called the 50-30-20 rule. And the 50-30-20 rule is where you split up your expenses into 3 different categories, where 50% goes towards your needs such as rent and mortgage payments, car payments, utilities, and groceries. 30% goes towards your wants such as streaming services, subscriptions, shopping, going on a trip, but obviously this could be anything you want. And then 20% goes towards your future financial goals such as saving for an emergency fund, investing, saving for retirement, saving for your child's education, or paying down debt, or anything else. So you definitely don't have to use this guide. It's kind of just an example of something that you could follow that I think is pretty popular. And on a side note, once your income gets to a certain level, the percentages aren't going to be realistic anymore and you don't really need to follow them. So for example, if you make $500,000 a year, you don't necessarily need to be spending $250,000 on fixed expenses. If you make that much, you'll be a lot better off than allocating 20% to financial goals, because you could really allocate a whole lot more than that. Number 5 is going to be to follow the popular saying you may have heard of before called pay yourself first. And what this means is essentially when you get paid, calculate how much of that money needs to go to your fixed expenses, calculate how much needs to go to your future goals, and then whatever is left over is how much you have to spend that month. You will likely have to adjust your spending to do this correctly, but this is probably the number 1 piece of advice I have, because a lot of people get their paycheck and spend what they want on things they want, and then whatever is left, they, pay for their needs and their financial goals. And most of the time that results in their needs almost taking up the rest of their paycheck, and then they have nothing left for financial goals because they spent all of it. Number 6 is just going to be to review your budget regularly, because things can change. The amount of money you take home could change. You may have a change in monthly expenses if you move or something like that. You might want to change your future financial goals if you reach one, or maybe you start making more money and want to have more ambitious goals. Basically, you just always want to keep an eye on everything and make sure there are no surprises. And I know it's tough to start doing all this stuff in the short term. It can be, like I said earlier, it can be stressful to figure out your goals and figure out how to do your budget. It's definitely stressful in the short term, but I promise you, you will reach your financial goals, and it'll 100% be worth it in the long term if you just make a plan and stick to it. So I hope this info was useful. I'll put the articles that I got all of this info from down in the description below if you want to check them out for yourself. As always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.